They laughed at him. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to remind him where he belonged. The kind of laughter that doesn't echo, but settles. The kind that stays with you long after the room goes quiet. On that night, inside a glittering ballroom high above Lagos, everyone had already decided who he was. A nobody, a failure, a man surviving on the mercy of a wife who had long stopped loving him. No one noticed the way he stood, still, calm, watching. No one noticed the way his eyes moved, not nervously, not bitterly, but measured, as if he were counting something only he could see. And no one, not his wife, not her friends, not the powerful executive sipping champagne, realized they were standing in the presence of the one man who owned everything they feared losing. Because power, when it is real, does not announce itself. It waits. Title: The Silent Billionaire. Episode 1. The man everyone looked down on. If you had met Ethan Cole 5 years earlier, you might have believed in him. Back then, he smiled more. He spoke with his hands. He dreamed out loud. He believed love was enough. That marriage was a partnership. That loyalty was mutual. That sacrifice would one day be returned. He was wrong. Now, at 38, Ethan wore his disappointment like a second skin, invisible to everyone else, heavy only to him. Tonight was his wife's company gala. Not his. Her company. That was how people introduced it now. Claire Bennett's firm. Claire's success. Claire's moment. Ethan was just there. A shadow in a borrowed suit. Claire didn't even look at him when they arrived. She walked 3 steps ahead, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Phone pressed her ear as she laughed, not the laugh she once shared with him, but the bright practice sound she saved for people who mattered. Of course, she said into the phone. I'll introduce you to the board myself. She didn't say my husband. She never did anymore. Ethan followed silently, hands clasped behind his back. The room was alive with money. Crystal chandeliers, tailored suits, perfume that cost more than most people's rent. And whispers. Is that him? I thought she'd left him already. He looks small. Ethan felt none of it, not because it didn't hurt, but because he had learned something over the years. Pain becomes quiet when you stop resisting it. 5 years earlier, they had nothing then. A 1-bedroom apartment. Flickering fan. Takeout carton stacked by the sink. But they laughed. Claire would sit on the floor with spreadsheets spread around her, dreaming out loud. One day she'd say, eyes shining, I run a company so big they'll beg me to speak at their events. Ethan would smile and nod, already working 2 jobs, already saving, already planning. He sold his car quietly, delayed his own projects, pulled strings he never spoke about. When Claire asked where the money came from, he shrugged. Side work. He never lied. He just never explained. Claire finally turned to him near the bar. Try not to embarrass me tonight, she said softly, adjusting his tie with sharp, precise movements. These people are important. Ethan met her eyes. There was no anger in his gaze, only distance. I won't, he said. She scoffed. That's what you said last time. She walked away before he could respond. A man approached her immediately, tall, confident, wearing a watch that glittered aggressively. Daniel Harper. Ethan knew him. Everyone did. Daniel was the rising star, the deal maker, the man everyone wanted on their side. Daniel leaned in close to Claire, his hand resting far too comfortably at the small of her back. She didn't move it. Ethan noticed. He always noticed. The speeches began. Applause followed every hollow word. Claire stood at the podium, radiant, powerful, alive in a way Ethan hadn't seen in years. This company, she said, represents resilience, vision, fearless ambition. The crowd cheered. She didn't thank Ethan. Not once. When the applause died down, the champagne flowed faster. So did the cruelty. A group gathered near Ethan, friends of friends, executives who had heard just enough gossip to feel bold. So what do? One woman asked him, smiling thinly. I consult, Ethan replied. For who? Another asked. Ethan paused. For companies, he said carefully. They laughed. Well, the first woman said, sipping her drink. At least someone has to stay home while Claire conquers the world. Someone bumped into him, deliberately. Wine sloshed. Red spilled across Ethan's shirt. Gas echoed. Claire turned. For a moment, just a moment, Ethan thought she might care. Instead, she laughed. Honestly, Ethan, she said loudly, could you be any more useless? The room went silent. Go clean yourself up, she added. You're ruining the atmosphere. Something shifted then. Not in Ethan. In the room. Because humiliation, when done publicly, leaves fingerprints. Ethan looked down at the stain, then back up at his wife. I will, he said calmly. No anger. No argument. Just acceptance. He turned and walked away. Behind him, the laughter returned, louder now, relieved. No one noticed Daniel watching Ethan leave, unease flickering briefly across his face. Ethan stood alone in the bathroom, water running over his hands. The mirror reflected a man everyone thought they understood. They were wrong. His phone vibrated. One message. Unknown contact. They've signed the preliminary agreement. Waiting on your approval. Ethan stared at the message. Then typed back. Proceed. Quietly, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. Outside, the party continued. Inside the ballroom, Claire laughed as Daniel whispered something that made her blush. She had already decided. She would leave Ethan. She would win. She would finally be free of the man she believed had held her back. What she didn't know was this. The company celebrating tonight. The deal Daniel was so proud of. The future she was building. All of it belonged to the man washing wine from his cuffs in silence. 1 year earlier, Ethan sat across from 3 men who never raised their voices. We don't attach names, one said. We attach results. Ethan slid a folder across the table. Inside, projections, acquisitions, quiet leverage. Discretion is non-negotiable, another added. Ethan nodded. I prefer it that way. They signed that day. No press. No announcements. Just ownership. Back at the gala, Claire found Ethan near the exit. You're leaving, she asked sharply. Yes. Good, she said. Save me the embarrassment. He studied her for a long moment. Claire, he said quietly, are you happy? She laughed, sharp, bitter. Happiness doesn't matter, she said. Power does. Ethan nodded slowly. I see. She turned away. That was it. The last thread snapped. Ethan stepped into the night. Rain soaked the city, blurring lights into streaks of gold and red. His phone vibrated again. Unknown contact. The board meeting is scheduled. She'll be there. Ethan looked up at the skyline. At the city that had underestimated him. At the life that had erased him. Good, he said aloud, though no one was listening. Let her arrive early. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought humility meant failure. They believed power needed an audience. They were wrong. Because some men don't rise loudly. They don't announce their victories. They let the world walk past them. Until the moment it realizes. It has been standing on borrowed ground. And when the truth finally arrives, it doesn't shout. It changes everything.